Hello, we are William and Shelley Robinson with Sun Sand Sea Travel, here to visit with you today about river cruising. So Shelley, tell me some of the major cruise lines that do river cruising.
So there's three major players in the market for river cruising. We have Avalon, AMA Waterways, and Viking. Those are the top three that you hear a lot about. But there's other players in the market too, as in Scenic, Uniworld, etc. There's even a couple U.S. companies that we'll talk about a little bit later in the video.
Great. And what are some of the major differences in the onboard experience between a river cruise and an ocean cruise?
Onboard is a big difference between river cruising and ocean cruising. Size of ship is probably the biggest. Actually with river cruising they call them boats and not ships. So you have a much smaller boat, which means not as much entertainment. Usually you have a piano player, maybe a 3-4 piece band playing at night. That's your source of entertainment instead of the big Broadway productions. You have less restaurants to choose from, but I will say usually the food is much nicer on a river than an ocean cruise, depending on which cruise line. And then we always talk about cabins. Your cabin is usually very spacious on a riverboat, which a lot of people find surprising, but you also have a lot more balcony cabins to choose from than you do. They don't have interior cabins on riverboats, so a lot of people like that aspect a lot.
Ocean cruise liners typically have 16, 17, 18 decks. They're very tall and somewhat intimidating. Most of your river cruise are going to have 3, maybe 4 decks at the very most above waterline. So
usually 4, but yeah.
Difference there, and that's a little bit about the onboard experience. What's the off-port option really look like?
So ports with river cruises are usually obviously a much smaller port, so you get submersed into the culture a lot faster and a lot easier than you do with ocean cruising. Obviously, if you have less people on the boat, you're not going to have as many people on your tour. The best thing about river cruising is that you have at least one, sometimes multiple options of tours that are already included in the cost of what you've already paid for your river cruise. So you guys have to excuse the car alarm in the background. But that being said, a lot of times with ocean cruising you have to pay for every excursion, but with river cruising you have at least one choice to choose from. You don't have to take that if you decide that you want to do something different, but it is there.
And who is the typical person sailing on a river cruise line?
River cruises are usually for a more mature traveler, and I hate to say that because a lot of people don't want to fall within that category, but it is true. Adventurous people, so people that have already maybe been to a location but they want to dive a little bit deeper into the culture, and then also curious explorers. Let's dig, like I said, let's dig into that section of the world a little bit deeper than just skimming the top of it.
So typically that experience is really much more immersive.
Yes.
You've got a guide that's not only out on port with you, but they're also on the ship or the boat talking to you about what your expectations are going to be when we get to the next port.
Yep.
So that's going to really expand upon your experience, really. So what are some of the major ports of call, or the popular ports of call for a lot of the river cruise lines? Amsterdam
and Paris are great big ones that come to the first thought of my brain. Also Budapest is big. There are some cruises that start in Budapest, there's some that end in Budapest. You also have Frankfurt, you have Prague, all those really awesome interior European countries that you can't hit on an ocean cruise, you get to experience on a river cruise.
And is a passport required to go on all of these different cruises? Sure.
Absolutely. Still require a passport. Unlike a U.S., if you're leaving from Miami on an ocean cruise, you don't necessarily have to travel with a passport. It's highly recommended, but you don't have to. But with a river cruise, yes, you have to have the passport.
So if I don't have a passport, or if I want to explore America a little bit better, are there some ships or boats that will take you on a river cruise within the U.S.?
American Queen, I think it's American Steamboat Queen. They do a Mississippi cruise that's quite popular. Stop along a lot of the little towns on the Mississippi. There's, I think, one that does the Snake River depending on the time of year. So there are a couple options for that. The best opportunity for the U.S. if you want to combine that with a land tour. So a lot of people will do do the American Riverboat Queen, and it ends in New Orleans, and then they stay for 3 or 4 days in New Orleans and experience it.
So sometimes when we're looking at ocean cruises and they're a little bit more immersive of an experience, some of your nicer lines, they will spend 1, maybe 2, 3 days in port. Does a river cruise ever do something that's similar to that?
Absolutely. So a lot of your river cruise companies will, especially on not necessarily the 7-night itineraries, but you can do a 14, 21 day even itinerary, and they will do overnights in some ports, which a lot of people love. I think one of the next things we've talked about before, or the questions that we get asked are, can you do river cruising any time of the year? The answer is absolutely yes.
100%.
So it's not just in Europe. How about the Nile? Can you imagine a river cruise on the Nile? There's lots of opportunity in China and Asia and things like that to do river cruising also. So it doesn't have to be focused on Europe.
Perfect. So that about wraps up some of the questions that we often get when we're talking about river cruising. If you'd like to learn more, feel free to reach out to us. We'd be happy to visit with you about many of the options that you have available, whether it be for river cruising, ocean cruising, or any other travel. We're here to help you. We look forward to hearing from you soon.